Come. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Angie Barker Jackson, and I am the Vice President of Institutional Advancement here at Berkeley School of Theology. We are so delighted you have joined today's First Friday Lunch and Learn session. If you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, we invite you to do that. We also encourage you to set your video to speaker view for the best visual experience today. No matter where you are or what time it is for you, feel free to enjoy a meal or a snack during the program. That's why we call it Lunch and Learn. This series is sponsored and planned by the Alumni Office. Melissa LeBeuf, Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement, will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions during the presentation, be sure to drop them there. We will address questions around 12:40. Thanks, Melissa, for doing that and for helping me to remember that our guests have asked for a 5-minute warning before we start the Q&A. These Lunch and Learns have been designed with 3 purposes in mind: learning, connecting, and being. Each month features a different topic and a new guest. Our hope is that topics will stretch and challenge our minds, that we will connect and reconnect with others in the BST network, and that this will be a space of radical belonging. Thank you for joining us on this first Friday of March, the month in which we celebrate and honor women's history. We are delighted today to feature one of BST's gifted and thoughtful professors, Reverend Dr. Laura Jean Torgerson, who is joined today by her own pastor, Reverend Clarence Johnson from Mills Grove Christian Church, and another guest that we'll introduce shortly. If you are a regular attendee of our Lunch and Learn program, then you are familiar with Dr. Torgerson, who serves as Associate Professor of New Testament here at BST. She's been our guest on multiple occasions, always encouraging us to read the biblical text faithfully and pressing us beyond our embedded interpretive frameworks. Dr. Torgerson is an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and has served congregations, hospitals, prisons, and as a missionary in Nicaragua. She delights in reading the Bible with people with a variety of interpretations and learning from the perspectives of others. Reverend Clarence Johnson grew up in Greenwood, Mississippi, where his community and congregation were on the front lines of Black voter registration and witnessed to the many ways that existing power structures worked to suppress Black voters. When Clarence was young, Medgar Evers spoke from the pulpit of his church, and he attended the March on Washington with a busload of other youth from Mississippi. Multiple times in the past year, Pastor Clarence has reminded the Mills Grove congregation that we have been here before. Threats to government benefits and even the murder of white women who support movements for freedom are nothing new. We hope today's conversation will provide more historical insights, as well as some hope and inspiration in the ongoing struggles for liberation. Also joining them is Reverend Johnson's friend, Mike, who will get a proper introduction from the others in just a moment. Welcome to all of you. We're eager to hear what you have to share with us today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to Clarence and to Mike Miller, who is joining us as well. I will let Clarence say a little bit more about Mike, but first I'm going to say a little bit more about Clarence, who is my colleague as a fellow Disciples minister, my friend, and my pastor. And we had the privilege of working together for about 4 or 5 years with the Disciples Seminary Foundation here in Northern California, working with seminary students. And I would like to ask you to introduce Mike Miller, a veteran of the civil rights movement.
Thank you, Professor Torgerson, and Vice President Angie, President Brenneman, and Dean Fletcher, and all of you. It's good to see you. Mike Miller is a native of San Francisco, California. He was in Mississippi in Greenwood in 1963 for the full year. We rode together to the March on Washington on the same bus, and I did not know Mike. Mike did not know me. We finally met in 1995 at the City of Paris restaurant in San Francisco. Mike has written a very important book. It's called A Community Organizer's Tale about people in power in San Francisco. He is a veteran of the civil rights movement, and it is a joy to have him here to be with us today.
Thank you, Clarence.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. So many times in the last 14 months, it has been really important for me as a member of Mills Grove to hear my pastor remind us from the pulpit that we have, in fact, been here before, that there are many resonances between what's going on today and what was going on back in the civil rights movement. It has helped me not to despair when things seem pretty grim. So I thank you, and I really wanted more people to get the benefit of the stories that we've heard you tell from the pulpit than just our congregation.
Sure.
So I think that one of the themes for our conversation will be that sometimes the things that people really stay with you. So someone might say, it just sticks with you. And a seminary professor of mine said that the United States collective consciousness is ahistorical. We do not like to remember history and what has happened. And so I hope part of what we're doing today is lift up some important pieces of that history rather than forget them. And my mother said, when giving me some unsolicited advice about preaching, she said, you should tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I'm going to offer a preview to our friends of what I hope we're going to themes that are going to come up. The first one, and these are things that I heard you say in our conversations preparing for this interview, is that change can happen really slowly at first, and then it can build and things change really fast. Another is the importance of solidarity, of mutual aid, of showing up even when you are not one of the people directly impacted. Mike told me something already about the contagiousness of courage and the significance of material support for people who are putting their bodies on the line in these struggles for justice. I've heard about the role of music to inspire people in these movements and the mixed role that churches had and can have. Sometimes they're acting for good and sometimes they are making different choices. And we will talk about that a little bit. This is Women's History Month. Some recent books on women in the civil rights movement, one is more recent than the other, are Witnessing and Testifying and Have You Got Good Religion? And names like Joanne Robinson, who was deeply important to the Montgomery bus boycott, have been celebrated more recently. I hope that we might hear something about Fannie Lou Hamer today, about Mahalia Jackson perhaps, but we're also going to hear about at least 3 women who are local women from Greenwood, Mississippi. Laura McGee, who was a Black woman who owned a farm, Minnie Johnson, who was an older sister of Clarence's, and Augusta Johnson, Clarence's mother. So without further ado, I'd like to pose my first question to Clarence. So how did you first get involved in the civil rights movement?
Glad you asked that question. I'm happy to share. I grew up in the Delta, Greenwood, Mississippi, a 4th generation member of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And as an 8-year-old, I was just having fun, enjoying life, not aware of all of the history that was taking place around me. I had a friend who came from Chicago. His mother sent him from Chicago to Greenwood to be with his grandmother because it was so violent in Chicago. He told me about these mass meetings that were happening. And I'd never gone to one of them, even though one was held in my church, First Christian Church at the time. I went to the mass meeting, and all of a sudden something happened to me while I was there. I heard these songs, I've got the light of freedom, oh freedom over me, we shall overcome. And I was just captivated by that. And I started going to all of those mass meetings whenever they were held. And it was there that I had a chance to hear the likes of Stokely Carmichael and some of the others who were there that really impressed me, and I became involved in that. By the time I was 12, I became a member of the youth chapter of the NAACP, and was able to go to Clarksdale, Mississippi, where Aaron Henry, who was a pharmacist, had a drugstore, and we would stop there to on our way to Washington, D.C. Mike and I were on the same bus, but again, I did not know Mike. I was at that time probably 12 or 13 years old. Had a great time in Washington, D.C. We were there at the Reflecting Pool, kids from Americus, Georgia, and other places, and we took our shoes off, had our feet dangling in the water there in the Washington Monument, and all of this history was happening around us. I don't remember hearing the "I Have a Dream" sermon, but I did meet some important people while we were there, and it was just important being there. And I had a chance to reflect on that a little bit later as things unfolded. In 1964, the Freedom Summer happened. And there were about 3,000 white students who came down from the North and from the West to be a part of that Freedom Summer. I went to a number of Freedom Schools. I think Paul and Wendy Klein. Wendy Klein was my first teacher in the Freedom School. We had a magnificent time. It was that summer that I was arrested, quite frankly, and put in the jail cell. They had taken all of the mattresses off of the beds. And there was some guy who was there before any of us got there, and we were told that he was running this cage. But by the end of that day, A. Garnet Day, who had come from our church in Indianapolis with my mother to get me out of jail, and I said, "Oh my God, the kingdom has come." I've never been so happy in all of my life to get out of that jail cell. And that was my beginning there in the civil rights movement in Greenwood, Mississippi. And Mike was there also during that time.
Yeah, thank you. Mike, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about how it was that Greenwood, Mississippi came to be on the front lines of history.
I'd be happy to tell you about Greenwood, but let me first, lest you have the idea that mass meetings were thousands of people, we called 20 or 30 people in a church meeting a mass meeting because the fear when I first arrived in Greenwood was so deep that it took a great deal of courage just to show up at a meeting. And I want to tell a story from one of these mass meetings that I attended. An old man, probably as old as I am now, got up and he spoke at this mass meeting. And he started talking and he said, "Now I want to tell you, they call you Freedom Rider." We were called Freedom Riders. "They call you Freedom Riders outside agitators." And he started moving his arm like this, back and forth. And he says, "I got an old style washing machine in my house." And he says, "It's got a thing that goes back and forth cleaning the laundry." And he says, "You know what they call that thing? It's called an agitator." And ever since then, I've never been ashamed or embarrassed of being called an agitator. So we were agitators getting the dirt out of Mississippi. Greenwood became a center for the movement in a way, by accident. The first idea was that it was going to be in Southwest Mississippi, but for a variety of reasons, that had to be changed. The fear was deep there. There'd been some brutal retaliation, and Southwest Mississippi just didn't seem right. And so the movement, SNCC, moved its initial effort up to Greenwood, a town in the Delta of Mississippi where cotton had been king, and about 80% Black population. The people who first started the work there for SNCC were Sam Block and Willie McGee, both native Mississippians. And when they arrived, the fear was so deep that they could not find a home of a local person where they could stay. So they were sleeping in their cars. One of the first people to open up to the movement was a woman named Laura McGee. Laura McGee owned a farm, and it had a triangular shape because on one side there was a state highway and the other the federal highway, and they joined at the point here and merged and went north. And she had two sons who were very early activists in the Delta and in Greenwood. Well, we had in the summer of '63, there was a freedom concert on Laura McGee's farm. And the guest singers were Theo Bickel, well-known folk singer, Pete Seeger, and Bob Dylan. So three well-known American folk singers, plus the SNCC Freedom Singers, a quartet. At that time, I think four black guys, later joined by women, so that the Freedom Singers became a mixed group. And surrounding on the state highway were state police, and on the county road, I might have misspoke before, it's a county road, were county police. So here we were ringed by police cars as we listened to this wonderful concert. And that was the day that I arrived in the Delta, along with another white fellow by the name of Dick Fry. And it was, our working in the Delta was controversial because Bob Moses, who was the state director, thought the presence of whites increased the likelihood of violence. And so he initially opposed our being there. But he was convinced by Sam Block, the local project director, and Jim Foreman, SNCC's national director, that we should be there. And the compromise was that we would remain close to the office. We didn't exactly follow that, but that's another story.
Thank you. So one of the moments recently where you mentioned, Clarence, some of these connections and the fact that we've been here before was when federal food benefits were threatened because of budget battles in DC. And so back in November, I remember you saying that we've been here before. How was federal food aid involved in the struggle for justice in Greenwood?
Yeah. In '63, there were two Democratic senators. One was John Stennis, whose base was in Jackson, Mississippi, and the other was James O. Eastland. His base was in the Mississippi Delta. He owned most of the land in the Delta. And they were powerful senators in Washington, D.C. And as people were trying to go and register to vote, he decided that one of the things that they could do is that they could restrict food. At that time, they were getting what was called commodities. You would have some dry beans, some cheese, and that's how people sustained themselves, particularly during the winter times. And they cut all of that off, and people were literally starving because they couldn't get any food. So a number of the supporters of SNCC organized some trucks, and they were able to bring food in these huge trucks down to the Delta. Many of the churches opened up at that point. Our church opened its doors and moved all of the pews away, and they had food just stacked up in the church, and people were fed because of that. They also brought clothing as well. Mike, you were talking about the agitator. That man's name was Brother Jordan. We call him Jordan in Mississippi, but it was Jordan. And he also told a story about a famous whip popper. This guy was so good with his whip, he could pop the fire off of your cigarette without touching your face. Somebody said, "Well, look, what are we going to do with all of this stuff that we have?" He said, "Well, let's get away from the whip popping for a minute. Let's talk about a beehive." The reason that he couldn't pop a beehive was because they were too well organized. He could pop anything except that beehive because they were organized. And that way he talked about the importance of organizing and in the Delta in Mississippi during that time.
That's great. And so, Clarence, how did your church get the word out that people could get food there? Come get food there.
It was basically word of mouth.
Uh-huh.
People had stopped coming to our church because they had jobs, and if they would come to our church because of the mass meetings, they would lose those jobs. And so again, from Indianapolis, which was the headquarters of our church, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the Department of Church and Society, they would send my brother $50 every week for 9 months in order to sustain the operation at the church, and also for us to get some of the things that we needed as well. So for 9 months, our church sent $50 to my brother so that we could sustain ourselves. And that's one of the reasons that I'm going to be a disciple of Christ for the rest of my life, because they fed me when I was hungry.
Amen. And so what was your church called at that time?
It was called First Christian Church. When CBS did a report on our church, First Christian Church, there was also a First Christian Church across the other side of the river, and it was all white. And they decided, well, look, we don't want to get confused with this church. So they sued our First Christian Church. We had to change the name. And so the name now is East Percy Street Christian Church. Later, they wanted to sell that church and asked us if we wanted to buy it. We said, no, I don't think so. We'll pass on this stuff.
Thank you. Mike, could you say something about the role of that First Christian Church where Aaron Johnson, Clarence's brother, was pastor, in kind of the bigger picture of things happening in Greenwood?
Well, an important piece of the organizing work was to get the churches to open themselves to the movement. We always talked about it as the movement. And pastors were reluctant to do that, afraid to do it and reluctant to do it. And they had members who shared that fear and reluctance. So SNCC's strategy was to find within those churches leaders, typically women. We called them the ladies with the big hats because they wore these big hats Sunday service. And they became the inside voices pushing their pastor. Well, Clarence's brother didn't need to be pushed. He was the first pastor to open his church to the meetings of the movement. And he had opposition within his congregation to doing that. But he was a truly courageous man who was a key figure, really, in opening the Greenwood movement to a wider base of support.
And what did it mean for SNCC's work in Greenwood that First Christian had opened its?
Well, I wouldn't say it was the effect of dominoes falling, but once Aaron Johnson opened his church, became much harder for the mainline Baptist and other historically Black denomination pastors to keep their doors closed. Mm-hmm. So he really was a central person in getting things going in Greenwood.
Yeah. There were two other churches that opened up. One was Turner Chapel AME Church, which was across the railroad track.
Right.
And then Wesley United Methodist Church, which is where I heard for the first time Fannie Lou Hamer speak. Mm-hmm. Fannie Lou was, my goodness, a courageous woman. And she had this saying, I'm sick and tired. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. She was the 17th child of her parents, sharecropper. And when she decided to become involved in the civil rights movement, they kicked her off of that area. She was arrested in Winona, I think, Mississippi, mm-hmm. and she was beaten almost to death, not only by the sheriffs, but also there were other inmates that they called to beat her as well. But she was steadfast, and she would always quote Ephesians 6 about, this is not flesh and blood. But these are evil kinds of things that are happening. But we have to put on the whole armor of God if we're going to withstand all of this violence that's been projected at us at this point.
Thank you. So one of the other really moving moments for me in our congregation, was the week that Renee Good was murdered in Minneapolis. And that was another moment where you said, we've been here before. Yeah. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. A housewife from Michigan came down to Alabama, Valo Luizzo, and she was driving some workers to and fro to various meetings that were taking place. And on Highway 80, she was killed. And I did not know her, I'd never met her, but we were having a mass meeting at the Elks Hall that night. And they asked me at the end of that meeting to give a prayer. And of course, I don't know what I said, but I gave a nice little prayer, I think, at that point. But when I learned about Renee Nicole Good being killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I thought about Valerie Luizzo, who was a mother. I think she had 4 or 5 kids at that time. And I was just overcome with emotions. And I didn't understand that it took me so long to mourn her passing. But when Renee Nicole Good was shot, all of those emotions came up again. And I had to take a moment just to sort of gather myself from that. But, we went through a lot of funerals when Sherna Goodman and Cheney were killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. A bunch of us went to Meridian, Mississippi, I think, for the memorial for James Cheney. And 3 of us, Willie Mayfield, Charles Thurman, and I decided we were going to go by ourselves. We got on the bus, went to Jackson, Mississippi, and decided to go into the lunch counter in Jackson. And we sat down. We didn't have any money. We sat down, and a guy came up with a crabapple switchblade knife and said, "You fellows should get out of here." And we decided that, well, maybe we should. That's good advice. So we got up and went outside and sat on the baggage cart until our bus came. And then we got on the bus and it was like, wow, that was pretty close. But we made it to Meridian, Mississippi for the memorial service for James Cheney. And Dave Dennis, I think it was with CORE at that time, was one of the keynote speakers. And it was just a powerful, powerful message. I also met A. Philip Randolph, who was the head of the Pullman car porters for the first time. And I'd never seen anybody who looked so eloquent. This guy had on a black suit and a white shirt. I'd never seen a shirt that white before. And he would stand with his hands like this. And for the next 6 months, whenever I would stand, I was A. Philip Randolph. That was an important thing for me.
Wonderful. So Clarence, who was the first person in your family to register to vote?
I think my brother Aaron was the first, and then my sister Minnie, who was the second oldest of 8 of us, went also to register, and she was able to register to vote as well. But those are the first 2 in our family. When my mother finally went to register to vote, all of the homes in Greenwood during those times had a piano, even if nobody could play the piano. It was sort of a status symbol in our neighborhood. And so on the top of that piano, there was a picture of Jesus Christ, which was a pretty big deal in the heart of the Bible Belt during those days. And then the next picture to go up was a picture of John F. Kennedy. It was pictured on the top of that. And then when Martin Luther King was assassinated in '68, his picture was also placed there. But my mother had those pictures there, and she was just so happy that she was able to go to vote. And she kept her voter registration certificate on that mantle for as long as she lived, next to all of those great people who were there as well.
Yeah. Thank you. So what are some other things that you'd like to share with our friends about your time there?
One of the things for me was a Freedom Summer. We didn't have a lot of interaction with whites, even though in my neighborhood we lived on the same street. African Americans on one end, whites on the other. We were in the same economic condition, but we didn't interact pretty much. We played together until maybe we got a little older, 8 or 9 years of age. But that was one of the things, to have those white students come down to Mississippi, putting their lives on the line. Many of them were middle class, but they came down to help, and I think it made a significant difference. To be able to walk down the street hand in hand in those days was a political statement. It was almost like a death sentence, quite frankly. But somehow we were able to survive that, and we were able to get through that time. But that was a very important time. I think I may have mentioned that Paul and Wendy Klein, my brother, officiated their wedding that summer as well, and it was just a good thing just to see that happen there in Greenwood during that time.
Okay, so you were pretty active in starting in 1963 and the summer of 64. What did your family decide you needed to do at the end of the summer?
Was in 1966, I believe,
Okay.
June the 21st. On the Meredith March, they were coming from Hernando, Mississippi, and when they got to Greenwood, Willie Ricks and Stokely Carmichael decided, well, this would be a good time for us to talk about change and strategy. And the place, which was about 5 blocks from my home, it was called the Playground. We played tennis and basketball there. And this crowd of people were there, probably 500 people. I thought there were probably, 6 or 7,000, quite frankly, but there were about 500 people there. And Stokely gave this passionate speech, and he ended by saying, what we need is Black power. And oh my goodness, you talk about the electricity there. Were you there, Mike, by chance?
No.
You were not there for that one. Stokely gave that speech, and it was like powerful. My goodness gracious. This was on I think the 16th of June, 1966. On the 18th of June, I was on a bus on the front seat going to Youngstown, Ohio. My mother sent me away from Mississippi. She said, I'm going to save your life. I'm going to get you out of here. So I spent the rest of that summer in Youngstown, watching all of this activity in the civil rights movement in Mississippi, wanting to be there. One of the fashions during that time was bell bottoms and these big, huge belts. And I was able to go shopping and get me some bell bottoms and in Youngstown, Ohio, there for 3 months. And I had a great time. But I think that was one of the things that probably saved my life, that I was able to get out of Mississippi and experience a new environment for the first time in my life.
So this is a question for
Well,
I'm sorry.
while there's just a little break before you ask your next question, Laura Jean, we've got about 6 or so minutes until maybe we shift to Q&A, and we do have a couple questions waiting for you when the time comes. Well, I've got your attention, if it's okay. I've asked if Stefanos will come and grab those books that you have in front of you, because we've had audience members ask if they could get the titles, and he'll type them into the chat. Can you just take them back to your station and type them in the chat, folks, Stefanos?
I'm bringing back.
Okay.
Sure, sure. And there are more on the table as well.
Well, we don't have to do all of those,
Okay.
but
Right.
but we had a request, and we try to, try if we can. So thank you, and about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll start bringing those questions from our guests, from our attendees.
Great. So now we have to keep this brief, and you have both lived long and full lives, and hope that there is much more to come. But for both of you, your involvement with civil rights in the 60s was not like a one-off thing, but it was really something that set your course for the rest of your life. So if you could just say a little bit about that before my final question. That's
I'm going to yield to you, Mike.
Okay.
Well, the SNCC experience was an extraordinary one. There was never before or since, as far as I'm concerned, such a collection of talent, brilliance, and dedication. So those are infectious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was deeply moved by that experience. And that's what was key to setting me on the course to becoming a full-time organizer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. One of the things for me, June Johnson, whose mother was Lulabelle Johnson. Lulabelle was a cook for the SNCC workers, and she passed away, I think, probably midway through that experience. But her daughter June stayed involved and went to Washington, D.C., did some great work in Washington, D.C. for a long time. She was quite, freedom, if you would cut her, she would bleed freedom. She was just that kind of person. But she was a magnificent human being, my neighbor, and just a great influence on a lot of us. The thing that I take away was that the first time I had the opportunity to vote, I went to vote, and I have never missed an election, regardless. I lived in Indianapolis, I lived in Greenwood, in Jackson, I lived in Oakland, in San Francisco. I have never in my life missed an election. Whenever there's a time for me to vote, I will go and I will vote. I hope that that spirit will still be alive and well in this off season, that the youngsters who are out there, the young people who are out there, that they would exercise this franchise to move us toward a more excellent union, which is what the goal had been. One of the things in the first mass meeting that I went to, they had this little chant, "What do you want? Freedom. When do you want it now?" And part of freedom, I think, is being able to exercise the right to vote. So that's where I would stop at this point.
Thank you. Well, I happen to know about you, Clarence, that and I read something that you wrote maybe 15, 20 years ago, that your commitment to the sacred worth and dignity of each human being has just been a guiding force in your work and your ministry, whether it's organizing, whether it's church ministry. And I think that is, what something that was lived out in that time in Greenwood, and then the work of SNCC. SNCC, by the way, is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which I'm not sure we spelled out yet. And anyway, and so I just, you've done community organizing in San Francisco and Oakland as a pastor, as a labor leader. So we know that it wasn't just a one-time thing for you. So I appreciate that. I guess it's maybe this is a way to sort of wrap it up, but this book is, I will tell you all, is called In Struggle, SNCC and the Black Awakening of the 1960s by Claiborne Carson. And I read this book after my first year of college, and it really shaped me. I had gone to a grassroots organizing workshop at my college, and read this book, and just wanted to sort of be involved in the movement, like in the way that people were involved in these days. And went on to take a class with the author Claiborne Carson on the modern Black freedom struggle. And I didn't know at the time that I was reading about Greenwood, Mississippi, but when I went back to look in the index, indeed, there are some sections in this story about Greenwood and about the work there. And they even mentioned the federal food aid being cut off, which I had forgotten. And so it came to me as new information when you talked about it back in November. So thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to be here. And I think it's time for our questions, and I hope there's some good ones.
Thanks, Laura Jean. So our first question is from our president, actually, Jim Brenneman. And he says, as a child of the South, myself living during the apartheid realities of the time, your comment about how young you were when you were brought into the movement was so moving. Could you speak as a pastor to the importance of engaging our children early as courageous witnesses to history, in contrast to those who are trying to protect children as too fragile to know history via book banning, children's books, etc.? Examples of courageous children: Ruby Bridges, the 4 girls in the Birmingham church bombing, one of which is a survivor, Carolyn McKinstry, and has an honorary doctorate from BST. Thanks, Dr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also add the Little Rock Nine to that group as well, and there have been others. I am a pacifist. I believe in the sanctity of all human life, and I try to live my life in that way. Just as I was thinking about Renee Nicole Good, when I heard about the bombing of Iraq and the death of the president, I didn't know the president. I don't know anybody in Iraq, but all 8 billion of us, I believe, are brothers and sisters. And it's important, I think. I felt I was pained. I was in the process of writing a sermon, And I had the same kind of emotional reaction when I heard that the president of Iraq had been killed, as I did when I heard that Renee Nicole Good had been killed. Um, there is, I think, a passage in Acts chapter 17 that God has made of one blood all nation of people. And so all of us are essentially brothers and sisters. And I think the challenge for us is to learn how to live together as brothers and sisters. And this word peace really becomes important. This is a time for us to keep moving in that direction. I think we've got some momentum, and it would be good for us to seize the time, as it were. Thanks, Mr. President, for that question. I hope it answered. I hope the answer was good for you.
Cool. Yeah, we have another question, and this is from an alum and pastor emeritus at Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, so Jim Hopkins. He says, it is ironic, maybe providential, that this forum takes place on the day that Reverend Jesse Jackson is being memorialized. Did any of you have the opportunity to work with him over these past years?
I met Reverend Jackson at least 4 times. I was in Indianapolis working on the national staff of our church as the director of Black ministry. He invited me to Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, and I had a chance to meet him and shake his hand. That was the first time that I met him. I met him again in Florida. He was doing some work down in Florida. He came to Jackson, Mississippi when I was a pastor at United Church there a number of times. I had a chance to meet with him there. This phrase, Dr. King speaking to a group of middle school students in Philadelphia, talked to them about the importance of having a life's blueprint. And the first thing he said about that blueprint was that you should be aware of your somebodyness, that you are important. Reverend Jesse Jackson took that and expanded it using the phrase, I am somebody. But when you look at scripture, if you go to the 3rd chapter of Exodus, for instance, when Moses was trying to get his people out of bondage, God was working with him, and God sent him. He said, well, if I go, who shall I say sent me? And God simply said, I am that I am. If you come to the New Testament, you get Jesus Christ, who says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection. So this whole thing of being I am, it speaks to our somebodyness, if you will. And it's an essential part of our blueprint. Not only is it a part of our blueprint, but it's also a part of those things that we need to keep ourselves grounded in our own humanity. And that's the way I would approach that at this point. The importance of being aware of your somebodyness, that this creator who made the sun, the moon, and stars, and all of this is also the same one who put us together, all 8 billion of us on this planet.
Thank you. Our next question is from the Dean, Leanne Flesher. What do you want us to remember about organizing? How can we inspire our communities to stand for justice? Give us a final inspiration, please.
So the question is, what do you want us to remember about organizing, and how can you inspire communities to stand for justice?
Well, the main thing that I think you should remember about organizing is that you want to reach the unreached, the reluctant, the frightened, the people who are not thought of as activists. Organizing goes beyond activists and seeks to tap within every person the desire for a better life, desire for just treatment, the desire for fairness, equality, and those values that are central to our tradition. That's why the agitator's story is so important. The agitator pushes people beyond what they thought initially was within their capacity to do.
And if you can't pop one of those bees out of that hornet nest with your whip, because they're so well organized, it's important for us to remain organized, to remain vigilant. They say that freedom is a long struggle, and we have to keep marching forward. I think we've got some good momentum now, and it's a great time for us to keep on pushing and to realize this dream that Dr. King had, and that all of us, I think in some way we have a similar dream for the best that America can be. So many opportunities in this country, so many great people here, so many great things have been done, and I believe the best is yet to come. All of you are a part of that journey as well. So thank you for your presence. Thank you for using your gifts and your abilities to keep moving us forward.
Great, thanks. We have time for a couple more questions. Here's, oh,
there's one thing I wanted to ask, if that's okay. Sorry.
Sure.
Tell us about the second time you were arrested.
The second time I was arrested was on Union Square in San Francisco. I was with Reverend Dr. J. Alfred Smith, Bishop Clifton. There was no South African consulate in San Francisco, so we went to South African Airlines. It was there on Union Square. And I think Ronald Reagan was president at the time. And by the way, Ronald Reagan went to school with one of our elders, went to Eureka College, and this was James Ratton. And James Ratton and Ronald Reagan were on, he called him Dutch Reagan. They were on the football team together. And Jim Ratton was the only African-American on that line. And the other players were giving him a very, very hard time. So Dutch Reagan invited them to his home for dinner. And the head seat at the table was always the place of honor. So he said, Jim, you sit right here. He said to those players, Jim is my friend. They said a blessing for the food they ate. He didn't have any more difficulty on that line with those players. Now, I never voted for Ronald Reagan one single time. I did appreciate the fact that he was a disciple of Christ at one point, but I always had respect for him, for his sense of humanity and the way he took care of one of his own at a very, very important time. It is important for us to use our voice. It makes a difference in every situation that we find ourselves in, and lives are changed positively because of those decisions that we make in those times. I think Bill Clinton said something the other day that I wrote down, that we all have the capacity to correct course. That if we're going in the wrong direction, we have the capacity to change and to go in the right direction. And so we need to give people the opportunity to use their capacity to correct their course if they're going wrong, and ourselves as well.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for two more questions. As we strive for change, oh, sorry, this is from Sam Fielder, he's Senior Administrative Officer here at BST. He's also a Doctor of Ministry student. As we strive for change, how can we learn the lessons from the civil rights movement about not othering those that oppose us?
So his question is, what can we learn from the civil rights movement about not othering those who oppose us as we strive? Not othering those who oppose us as we strive for change.
Well, the civil rights movement's attitude on that question really varied over time. So let me just take one period and say this, that the goal is not to annihilate your opposition. The goal is to find common ground and pull your opposition toward you. And sometimes that's hard to imagine happening, but it does, it can. I've seen it myself.
Thank you.
Mike had a great relationship with Stokely Carmichael and with Bob Moses in particular. These two I know you were very, very tight with. I've seen you with Bob Moses once or twice when he came to the Bay Area. And this is something that Mike lives each and every day of his life. He is, I'm not going to tell you how old he is, but he's a little bit older than I'm 76. But Mike has been doing this for a very, very, very long time. and he's still doing it. And I just want to say thank you, my friend, for all that you've done for me and for those of us who come from the Mississippi Delta, town of Greenwood, Mississippi.
Thank you, Clarence. The number is 89.
Okay.
89 and feeling fine.
And feeling fine.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think this is going to be our last question because we've only got about 3 minutes left. What kinds of courses do you think should be in the seminary theological curriculum to address the kinds of issues and needs you have discussed today?
What kind of courses?
Should seminaries teach to address these kind of issues?
I think it's important for our young people. I did a funeral just on Tuesday, and the deceased was 44 years old, and she had 9 children, all of whom were under the age of 17. And there were a bunch of other young people there that age. And after the service, before the repast, the meal, they were out in the streets doing what youngsters normally do. They were talking, they were having fun, looking at their hairdos and their sneakers and those kinds of things. Some went across the street, and we got some comments from some of the neighbors and some of the others about their presence in the community. I think it's important for us to keep focusing with our young people on their sense of somebodyness, that they are important, that they have a very vital role to play in this movement toward freedom, justice, to keeping peace in our communities. And if it's going to happen, it's on their plate right now. And to have some kind of course where we can sit these young people down, whether it's like this or whatever, just to let them know how important their voices are, their presence. We want them to be studious, to study and to learn, and put some of those things into practice as they build their lives together, and as they work to build families in their communities together as well. My sense would be that to keep them connected to their somebodyness and the Creator who made them the somebody that they are.
Do you have thoughts about
Okay.
seminary course offerings?
Well, I've had the pleasure and privilege of being a guest lecturer and seminar leader in a number of seminaries. And it's always because somewhere in the curriculum is a course on social change or the church and change. And those, the seminaries that have those courses are responsible for the creation of many, many, many key leaders and organizers in social movements of today and the past. Miles Horton, who's a central figure in the development of the Southern movement as a whole, both SNCC and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was himself seminary trained.
Thank you.
Very good. I can't express my gratitude enough, Clarence, Mike, and Laura Jean, for this conversation today. It's been so beautiful and so rich. And I want to thank you guys, especially here in recent moments, for the reminder, about Jesse Jackson and the idea of somebodyness. Maybe there's somebody else in the room like me. I was among the first generation of kids kind of raised on Sesame Street. And I don't know if you all have seen, the clip, but since Reverend Jackson passed, I have rewatched that episode in which he was on in the 70s, and he did this little exercise with the children on Sesame Street. I am somebody. And it's a beautiful clip. And if you all haven't seen that, you should look it up after this program. It's a really lovely thing to know and to remember. So thanks for that reminder. Before we log off today, we have a few announcements for the BST community. If you know someone, a friend, a colleague, a member of your congregation who is exploring theological education or thinking about it, please invite them to join our admissions webinar program next Tuesday, March 10th from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time on Zoom. BST Student Success and Financial Advisor, Dr. Derek Dowdy, will lead a session focused on financing one's theological education journey. The registration link is in the chat, and you can feel free to forward it to the people in your networks. Please note that we will not have a First Friday Lunch and Learn session in April, as we pause for the observance of Good Friday on the first Friday of the month. Our next First Friday Lunch and Learn program will be in May, featuring BST alum and ARC Initiative Program Director, the Reverend Dr. Lauren Lisa Ng. So please make plans to join us in May. The registration for that is in the chat. And finally, save the dates now for May 15th and 16th. BST commencement will be on Saturday the 16th at 2 p.m. And on the night before, we will host BST Alumni Living Sanctuary, a reception and program to welcome the class of 2026 into the BST alumni community. The registration for that will be open soon. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, for asking great questions. And thank you to Laura Jean for organizing this fabulous panel. Bless you, Mike and Clarence. It's been a delight to have you today. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.